Welcome to Issues That Matter. My guest today is Scott Ritter and my friend Alan Collinge. And Alan is the founder of Student Loan Justice. And we're going to talk about money today. So, Scott, um, your understanding is how much money are we spending funding the war in Ukraine?
Well, we need to understand we've been doing this for some time. People today, have short memories, but it wasn't too long ago that then President Trump was being impeached, and at the heart of the impeachment was a phone call he made where he allegedly threatened to withhold, almost $200 million worth of military aid to Ukraine if they didn't do a favor for him. The Javelin missiles. We've been sending money to Ukraine, hundreds of millions of dollars a year since 2015. We've been doing other funding prior to that. The most recent upswing in money, it came after the Russians initiated their special military operation, the invasion of Ukraine. And sometime in the April-May time period, we saw us make the crossover from hundreds of millions of dollars into billions of dollars. We had Congress consider what they call it's the new Lend Lease program. Basically an expansion or extension of a program that was initiated during the Second World War to provide military assistance to Great Britain and Russia and others. And today, as part of that program, I think we've seen upwards of close to $60 billion have been allocated to this, but that's just the money we know of. Understand that the Department of Defense operates on a budget that is not included in these additional funds. That the Department of Defense is spending billions of additional dollars of U.S. taxpayers' money in contingency funds. The 101st Airborne Division, for instance, is deployed now to Romania as a presence of force related to the Russian move. This is multi-billion-dollar expenditure. So we've in to Ukraine, I would say easily we've spent more than $100 billion over the course of the last few years, dealing with Ukraine, dealing with the potential of a Russian threat to Ukraine. $100 billion.
And that money is money that we're footing the bill for. The taxpayer is paying all this stuff,
Oh
right?
yeah. No, Scott Ritter's paying for it. Cynthia Puller's paying for it. Alan Collins paying for it. Everybody's paying for it. It's our tax dollars. Our tax dollars at work. There it is, right there. $100 billion that has been sent to Ukraine, and you got to ask yourself what we're getting for this investment. And the answer is not a damn thing. Fact is, the world hasn't become more secure. The world's become less secure. And then there's related expenditures because from the fear that we've generated because of this, there's now Europe is actually being required to up its defense expenditures by hundreds of billions of dollars. And much of that, even though they say it's European money, we will end up funneling money in as well. Then we have the other spinoff because now we've elevated the Russian threat to such an extent. We've just published, Biden just published the national security strategy document. We're now going to spend over the course of the next 10 years over $1 trillion. That's with a T, to modernize our nuclear strategic defense deterrence so that we can better respond to this Russian threat that we are responsible for magnifying. So there's there's an additional impact, fiscal impact, to simply putting this money, this $100 billion in. This $100 billion actually triggers additional releases of money, which over the course of the next decade will exceed $1 trillion. And I just ask anybody watching the show, what could you do with $1 trillion? And I bet you could come up with far more creative things than funding weaponry that goes to Ukraine for the purpose of killing Russians, but ends up being destroyed, and in the process of being destroyed, kills more Ukrainians. Because that's what your taxpayer dollars are getting you, dead bodies.
So, this $1 trillion, like you said, um, ultimately, what the taxpayers are not going to see any substantive value from this, right?
Well, when you say taxpayer, you and I, who pay our fair share in taxes, aren't going to see anything about. Now, if you're the CEO of Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or other defense industries who have managed to find loopholes and stuff so you don't pay that much taxes, your corporations don't pay taxes. So it's really hard to call them taxpayers. But they're going to see a lot of benefit. They're going to see their bottom line rise up. They're going to see their stock valuations go up because they're the ones producing the machinery of death. They're the ones receiving a lot of this taxpayer money to produce the machinery of death that goes to Ukraine and delivers death, not just to Russians, but to Ukrainians. So, there are some people who do benefit from this. I won't call them taxpayers because whatever they pay in taxes pales in comparison to the burden placed on the average American citizen.
So, Alan, Scott laid out his explanation for what's going on. You've been involved in student debt for many years. Tell us what's going on with people who are burdened with debt as compared to the money that's being thrown at the Ukrainians.
Well, the contrast between how we so happily and willingly spend money on typically lately unwise military pursuits versus the sudden conservatism and sort of alligator arms that come out when it comes to funding higher education in this country is shocking. The taxpayers have decided with the advent of this federal student loan program that not only are they not going to actually pay to educate their citizens, the government has decided that it wants to turn a profit on the endeavor. So since the 70s, actually maybe even before, the government has lent money to pay for people to pay for college, and it has commanded an extraordinarily high interest rate on these loans. This is for a lending program that back in 1965, President LBJ declared when he rolled out the lending system that the loans would be free of interest. Well, today, speaking of $100 billion, Scott, about $100 billion in interest alone clicks off on the backs of actual taxpayers who are saddled with this enormous debt. And this is affecting people across almost all spectrums, except for the uber wealthy. This affects true taxpayers from top to bottom. And I would maybe even include, moderately wealthy, marginally wealthy families who maybe they don't get loans, but they have to pay, full book value. They have to write a check for their kids' tuition every year. And they're impacted by the hyperinflation that this lending, I call it a scam, and it really is a scam, has created. So it's just a mess in all ways. And I think I'm so glad to be here with Scott today so that we can compare the two faces of the federal government when it comes to, paying for their citizens versus paying for foreign wars.
So you have been working for years on bankruptcy protection. Do you see that coming in the near future?
We were very hopeful, for the past 17 and a half years, we've been fighting very moderately only for the return of bankruptcy rights to these loans. A lot of people don't realize that student loans are uniquely stripped of this right. We were hoping very much, and we've got two great bills in the House and the Senate right now. Senator Dick Durbin and a couple of Republicans, believe it or not, Josh Hawley, John Cornyn, a great bill in the Senate, and a recently introduced companion bill in the House that would return bankruptcy to these loans. But it's sort of looking like they kind of did a bait and switch on us. And this is basically the establishment, Democrats and all the Republicans. It's looking like they're going to pull the rug out at the last minute, and that our bills will hopefully not, but it's looking like they'll probably expire at the end of the year. We were hoping to get this right returned by the election, but we've got 10 or 11 days to go here, and we don't see the bill being signed by the president yet. So hope is dwindling, but we are fighting very hard right now. So we'll see.
Tell us a little bit about the 10,000 dollar forgiveness program and how the Republicans are up in arms about that.
Well, the $10,000 cancellation is kind of a ruse in the first place. There's a lot of bureaucratic hurdles that are put into place, and historically, we've seen the Department of Education has no desires or intentions of actually canceling any loans. And now, lo and behold, we see the Republicans actually challenging the loan cancellation, claiming that the president doesn't have the authority to do it. He does, by the way, and that's maybe another conversation. But the Republicans are looking very strong going into this election, but if there's any way for them to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, putting their finger in the eye of the 38 million distressed student loan borrowers out there, that's a good way to do it. So they're trying very hard.
So, Scott, for the money that's allocated in Congress, there's really no vocal or very little vocal opposition, right?
There appears to be virtually none, because Ukraine's been turned into a politically charged issue where if you oppose this, you're supporting Putin. And of course, Putin's been demonized. So you have to do this. It's like Congress does this all the time. The Patriot Act. If you vote against the Patriot Act, you're inherently unpatriotic. And they go and they name things like that, support the Veterans Act. But if I oppose it because it doesn't support the veterans, I'm now accused of not supporting the veterans. On Ukraine, Ukraine has been turned into, the height of democratic values and freedom when it's not. It's the least democratic nation in Europe. There's no freedom. It's the most corrupt nation in Europe. But you can't say that because then you're pro-Putin. These are, Kremlin talking points. So can I ask Alan a question though?
Sure.
I'm going to take off my weapons inspector hat. I'm going to put on my concerned American taxpayer and father of two college graduates, meaning that I'm one of those people that you talk about, Alan. We are paying back student loans. Here's an argument I put out, because I took student loans when I went to college. I graduated in 1984, so the scope and scale was far different, et cetera. It took me 11 years to pay off a $30,000 debt. But I paid it off. And I hear a lot of people saying the same thing. I paid off my debt. Why should I have been burdened with paying off my debt now? You want me to do this, that, and the other thing. And here's the response I come up, and I want to see if you agree with my thinking, because I'm not an economist. But my point of view is this. Let's take a hypothetical daughter, because I don't want to put any of my daughters under the bus. But they graduate college and they get their first job. And their first job is, say, a $38,000 a year job, doing God's work, honest job, honest labor. But now they got to go into the healthcare market and get that insurance, because not every job has the great insurance. And that suddenly strips away. That $38,000 isn't $38,000 anymore, because healthcare takes a nice chunk out of it. And because they're now independent, they have to live in an apartment. They don't get to, they don't want to, and they shouldn't be living in, mom and pa's house. They go out on their own. So now they have to pay rent. They have to pay the electricity bill. They have to pay the bill. Now $38,000 just dwindles down to this. And now they're looking at what they have left. And this is what they need to pay for food and sustenance and survival. But then that bill comes in from the college loan department. And they realize that in order to meet their debt obligation for loans, they can't afford any of the things I just said. They can't afford to live an independent life. So now they have to come home and live with mom and pa. They're not investing in society. They're not buying the car. They're not doing the things that normal people would be doing with this kind of salary. The economy is not functioning to full potential. When you strip away these recent college graduates with these overwhelming college burdens, they are at home and they're disrupting the entire economic flow that's supposed to exist when you talk about a tax base. So my response is, if we paid off these loans, yes, it would be expensive up front, but we would actually be bringing a huge amount of stability into the economy. People would be able to rent more, buy more, produce more, which creates more of a tax base, and the economy would function. And I think that the benefit to the economy would exceed the cost of paying off the loans, especially over time. Am I wrong on this, or do I have a point?
No, I think you're exactly right. And people maybe your age or maybe a little older who paid off their student loans in years or decades past, they need to realize that these student loans today are a far different animal. Statutes of limitations were removed. Bankruptcy, which is the most important constitutionally enshrined right, was removed. And these debt instruments have become licenses to steal. And it hurts the country in every way. What you just said explains it perfectly. What good does it do to saddle young people who are the future of the country with this sort of debt burden that hamstrings not only they themselves, but the entire economy as well? It makes absolutely no sense. And, when you hamstring somebody at a young age, typically that really affects the whole arc of their life going forward. So the actual cost, the long-term cost to tax revenues, et cetera, is debilitating. And, today the numbers are just so stark. It's frankly horrifying. And this is according to Donald Trump's appointee, Wayne Johnson, who ran the lending program under Trump. Even before the pandemic, 85% of all federal student loan borrowers were either unable to pay their loans, and that's more than half, believe it or not, most people. But 85% in total were underwater on their loans. So like many people, perhaps even yourself, they were paying and paying and paying, but their loan balance was going up, not down. So this is exactly, I'm at a loss there's not enough time for all the adjectives that I could trot out to explain this catastrophically failed lending scam. It's just wrong in every way. And quite frankly, I don't think it's going to come back. I think the pandemic was the nail in the coffin. Whenever they try and turn the lending program back on, frankly, I don't think that even 1 in 5 borrowers are going to resume paying. I think most people will say, forget it. We can't do this. And
again, I don't want to get too personal on especially financial issues, but my wife continually brings up the point. She says, we have paid these loans off.
Yes.
And not just paid the loans off. We have paid. Look, I borrowed $30,000 to go to college, and I graduated in 1984. I think I ended up paying a total of $48,000 over the life of the loan. But I don't want to give away, but let's say hypothetically we borrowed 60 grand for a college education. We've paid say 90,000. So the debt that we paid it off, and we've given at least 50%, and they still say we owe another 30 grand, which means it's not 30 grand, because by the time you pay the interest, it's 50, 60 grand. So we're going to end up paying $140,000 on a $60,000 loan. That's highway robbery. Now, thank God we're in a position where we can do this, but I'm 61 years old. I'm supposed to be thinking about retirement. I'm supposed to be thinking about finding a nice shaded spot on a sandy beach that's a stone's throw away from a golf course. That's what I'm supposed to be thinking about, not how I'm going to be earning money till I'm 85 years old to pay off a college debt for a daughter who graduated in 2016. And I'm in a better economic state than everybody else there. And if I'm pulling my hair out, and if my wife's going, I can't say going great because she'd get very upset. But if she's worried about this, what are the people who aren't in at least in a stable? And when I say stable, every American is just one paycheck away from poverty. Meaning I'm stable as long as the paychecks keep coming in. But with this economy, there's no guarantee of that. So what happens if there's a hiccup next month? Now we're not saying, but that debt's never going away. ever.
Scott, you're hitting on all cylinders. And I mentioned how can we do this to our young people? But most student loan borrowers are over the age of 35. People over the age of 50, including people with Parent Plus loans, which is the fastest growing segment of the student loan portfolio. People over the age of 50 now outnumber people under the age of 25 with student loan debt. And these are mothers, fathers, grandparents, people taking out these Parent Plus loans for their children. It's what kind of a country does this to their seniors? I mean, this is ridiculous. We have people, and this is not hypothetical, just off the top of my head. This woman in California I spoke to recently, she borrowed $25,000, and she's about your age, by the way. So she borrowed back in
young and vibrant.
Yeah. Well, the 60 is the new 30, right?
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. But she borrowed $25,000, and here we are, however many years later, she's repaid over $100,000 on this $25,000 loan. She still owes $130,000 on a $25,000 note. So what began as a benign sort of good intention government support system for financing higher education has become the most predatory money grab of any financial scam against the citizens that I can point to. This is almost on a par with the amount of money that we sort of piss away in the deserts of Iraq and Afghanistan. But the differences are shocking, and it just makes blood shoot out of my eyes.
Scott, what do you think?
Me too. I agree. I mean, look, we're living it. I and other people are living it. We live this. This is our daily reality. What parent doesn't want to put their kids through college? I mean, that's the American dream. But the prices of college are just skyrocketing. I mean, even as you're in, they start freshman year. By the time you hit the end of freshman year, you're budgeting because we're just simple Americans, and so we assume that the money is going to be the same for the next year, but it's not. It's 15% higher. And you're like, where the hell do we get that money? But now your daughter's committed to school, so you go to the financial aid office, and they say, well, we have a solution for you. It's called Parent Plus, and we can do this. So we've maxed out what your daughter can get, but we can do this for the Parent Plus. So you sign on to that, then it comes into junior year, and the price goes up again. So you go back to the Parent Plus because your daughter's committed to the senior year, it's even higher. And by the time you graduate and she gets out there, both of you are staring at just the most ridiculous loans in the world. And people say, well, you knew what you're getting into. Do you really know what you're getting into when you're on? I mean, anybody who's put a daughter or a kid through college, and you come up to that final crunch with financial aid, where you go to the financial aid office and all that stuff, you're on such a time crunch, on such pressure, and you really don't have a plan B. There's not a plan B out there. I mean, I could rob a bank. I could do that one time, and then I'm going to spend a lot of time away, and I'm not helping anybody. So no, there's no option but to sign on the line. And you sort of scan the small print, but you're just like, no, I got to get this done. I got to get my daughter, because she's got to start buying books. She's got to start, making. It's an ambush. It's a 100% ambush. Maybe it didn't start out to be an ambush, but it's become such a sophisticated financial scam. And that the people that are doing it at this stage in the game understand the consequences of their actions. So there's no innocence here. This is a system designed to suck people in and rob them in perpetuity.
That's right. And you hit an important point about the sort of the mission creep on the part of the universities. Used to be you could graduate in 4 years. Today, the average, if they graduate, that's not around only people. If they graduate, it typically takes about 6.2 or so years to get that undergraduate degree today. And yeah, it's like you said, the loans in the first couple of years are pretty moderate. but come year 3, 4, and beyond, suddenly once they've got you by the short
The
leash,
short hairs, yeah.
they can do whatever they want. And here come the Parent Plus loans. You can borrow up to the cost of attendance. There are literally no limits on how much debt the parents can be saddled with.
That's right.
And I might also add the interest rate on Parent Plus loans is significantly higher than all other federal student loans.
Yep.
And they're also not available. They are not allowed to be used for various income-driven repayment programs either. So the parents are just being wrecked. And it's an American tragedy in the making. And honestly, the best thing that can be done right now is cancel these loans and end this lending system. This is not working. And if we can, throw $7 trillion, better than I do, Scott, into Iraq and Afghanistan, can we not spare $1 trillion or $2 trillion, not in taxpayer money, but rather in profits that the federal government can write off as a result of setting our country free? I mean, this is starting to look a lot like modern day slavery.
You would think that car salesmen and real estate agents, people who sell big ticket items, you'd think they would be up in arms. You don't hear anything from them, right, Alan?
Yeah, you would think that, the real estate trade groups, the chambers of commerce out there, various other interest groups and even the private commercial banks who make home loans, car loans, business loans, you would think that they would be up in arms. And we hear a few things from time to time from people like Jamie Dimon or Bill Dudley and, Federal Reserve. But typically, these people have been just quiet, and the silence is deafening. And, even worse, some of these trade groups, particularly the Chamber of Commerce, they rail against student loan relief. And I'm sitting here going, why are conservatives being quiet, or even worse, defending the worst big government economy wrecking, red state wrecking loan scam in the country? If you look at the worst hurt states, there are a gaggle of states where student loan debt federal student loan debt now exceeds the entire state budget. And these are states like Georgia, Florida, North South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Texas, Missouri. These are all southern states. And I'm sitting here going, how have the politics in this country become so upside down? It makes absolutely no sense. But
just to add on that, I don't want to get personal, but I don't know what other people's, student loan debt, but I can easily say that, it's our monthly student debt burden is around $2,000
a month.
A month, yeah. And Alan's nodding his head. He knows that's very realistic. And now my thing is, imagine if that $2,000 could be invested back into the community. I mean, that's me. Our family could invest $24,000 back into the community every year, in addition to what we already do. So now this is gravy. And the reason why I bring this up is, why don't the chambers of commerce understand this? That if you have just literally let's say in Delmar, we have 1,000 people, and I'm sure it's more, that are just like me. That's, I don't know, I'm bad at math, but 24,000 times 1,000 is a lot of money, millions of dollars that are now available to be reinvested directly back into the community, because that's where most of this investment would go into. We'd be going to the Home Depots to do home improvement. We'd be going, to restaurants more. People might be going out and renting or even buying a place. I mean, that's a mortgage. That is literally a mortgage. Cars, people be selling cars. And every time you do that, there's spinoff, because if you're doing cars, that's more business for the car manufacturers. If you're going to restaurants, that's more business for that industry, et cetera. Instead, it's $2,000 that disappears into a black hole that doesn't benefit the local economy at all. At all. There's no benefit. It's not like this money goes in, they say, here, we're going to feed it back into the economy. And so that's what I don't understand. And that's That's why I think that this student debt thing is actually killing the country. It's not just killing people like me, it's killing the country because the money's disappearing into a black hole. It's not coming back and communities are suffering. Instead, if you stopped it, you'd be getting a direct, immediate impact in the local economy, an immediate impact of people who suddenly are liberated and can do things with this money.
Now, I know that both of you have had dealings with President Biden. Uh, Alan, I've know you spoke to him a number of times, and Scott, I've seen the video, where you were before the Senate, and that was so terrible. He was humiliating you, and anybody of any conscience, I can't understand why they don't feel for the average person. What do you think?
Well, I'll just speak first of all on Biden. People look at that video clip, but they don't know the whole story. That video clip destroyed him politically. He was crushed afterwards. There was so much negative pushback. He had to invite me back to his office where we had nearly an hour meeting one-on-one where he had to apologize. So anybody who feels sorry for me for that, don't feel sorry for Joe Biden because he once again shot himself in the foot. But that's what Joe Biden does. He's all talk. He's nothing else. He's talk, 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 bluster, bluster, bluster. But at the end of the day, he's literally an empty suit. And that's my opinion. Alan may have a different opinion, but that's where I come from.
No, I have to unfortunately agree almost down the line. Joe Biden carries a lot of personal political baggage. His own had his hand in removing bankruptcy from student loans. And my conversations with Joe have been basically him over talking me. He laughed me out of the room on the bankruptcy issue. Our number one goal is simply to get bankruptcy rights returned. And I was laughed out of the room. And, he talks a big game, but at the end of the day, he seems to be as or more beholden to the banks, the other private financial interests than even most Republicans, quite frankly. And I'm a nonpartisan guy. I'm pretty much tired of both parties at this point, but I continue to hold out hope for President Biden that he'll come around and, this is a great opportunity for him to fix what, quite frankly, he helped to break. He could cancel these loans, by the way, without needing one dime, not one thin dime from the Treasury. These loans were funded many, many years ago, and the taxpayers didn't pay much. He could do it without adding a nickel to the national debt, and he can do it without Congress. And in fact, both he and President Trump have exercised the authority. This is the lowest hanging fruit on the fiscal stimulus tree. There's no easier, cheaper way to stimulate the economy. And so I don't know what is so important about this federal student loan program that both parties, it seems, are willing to, lose elections to keep this sucker alive. It makes no sense at all to me. The politics in this country are.
What do you think, Scott?
No, look, again, I start with the premise that I'm one of the suckers. I'm one of the guys that stumbled into this financial ambush, and I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm and not just for me. I mean, I'm a grown man, but for my kids. At their age, I was getting ready to buy a house. I was getting ready to do stuff. I was moving forward to become a productive member of society. And I'm not saying my daughters aren't, they are, but their friends, people like them, are just shackled by this debt. And their families. We know people whose families are suffering because of the Parent Plus loans. I mean, like I said, my wife and I are able to come up with the with the money needed to stay afloat, even though we have this debt. But there's people who can't. And, to see people my age suffering so much because of that, it's extraordinary. And to know that Joe Biden, Alan, I don't know the extent, but my understanding is he is the man who made the bankruptcy thing. It's not that he was sort of a side player. He is the guy, the one guy, the only guy responsible for that. For him to laugh you out of the office tells you one thing: he's 100% out of touch. Joe Biden is beholden to the banking industry. That's why Delaware exists. Delaware is a state who basically exists to create, to form corporations and to have banks and to have tax loopholes and to do everything to avoid a tax burden, to avoid financial burden, so that they can put the burden on the American people. I mean, so, if there's ever a revolution, I hope the first Revolutionary Army marches on Delaware and holds those accountable who are responsible for making the revolution possible. And that includes Joe Biden. He is fundamentally one of the worst Americans in American history because he has done more harm to this country than help. And I'm not talking just about his votes for war. I'm talking about the student loan thing. This is devastating American society today. Devastating.
I don't want to pile into Joe Biden too much here today, but I will say of all living, serving public officials in this country, of all of them, Joe Biden deserves more credit than anyone. So you're right, Scott. And I view this as a sort of morality test. Biden's presidency kind of a morality test on him. Like, is he going to do the right thing and fix what he broke? Or is he not? And, the book has yet to be written, but the first few chapters are not looking good for President Biden.
So we've been talking for quite a while, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that make comments about this on my YouTube channel. So, Alan, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just urge people to call their congressman, call the president, and just tell whoever you can think about to, at a minimum, return the constitutional bankruptcy rights that the founders called for in the Constitution ahead of the power to declare war and raise an army to these weaponized loans. I think that's where it all starts, and beyond that, I think we'll see meaningful loan cancellation after that. But kind of starts with bankruptcy, unfortunately.
Scott?
Read the Constitution, because what Alan's saying is so important. This isn't some obscure financial debate being held by bankers and such. This is about fundamental issues of what define this country. The Constitution defines this country, and we have a government operating in open defiance of the Constitution. It's we, the American people, who are paying the price.
So, Alan, why don't you plug student loan justice?
Oh, it's just studentloanjustice.org. We've got 2 great bills that we're fighting for right now. We're hoping to get something done before this election. I know time is short, but this is exactly when we need everybody in the fight with full metal jackets. Pedal to the metal. I'm trying to think of military things to say for Scott, but it's time to cross that line in the sand or whatever.
Scott, how's your book coming along?
Book's doing well, thank you. We had a great book event in Poughkeepsie earlier this week, well attended, well received, and I hope it's the first of many more to come.
Great.
Because I need to sell a lot of books to pay off this student loan.
So, tell us about the book and where people can get it.
I mean, I don't want to divert away from the importance of the student loan thing.
That's fine.
Well, the book is Disarm in the Time of Perestroika, Arms Control, and the end of the Soviet Union. It's about the INF Treaty, but it's also a template of hope on showing how in the past we resolved difficult problems with the Soviet Union, and maybe we could use that disarmament model to solve the problem that we have with Russia today. The publisher is Clarity Press, so you can buy directly from the publisher at claritypress.com. It's available on Barnes & Nobles, on Amazon, and most importantly, if you go to your local bookstore and tell them you want the book on the shelf, it can be on the shelf as well. It makes a perfect Christmas gift. And I believe one should buy one for every member of their family and spread the news.
So, I think I'm going to be getting a lot of comments. So I'll keep both of you up to date with the comments, and maybe we could further elaborate on this issue some more. So you've been listening to Scott Ritter and Alan Collinge. This is Issues That Matter, and if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube page. Hey guys, it's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Have a
Thanks
great
for having me.